Hi, friends. This is Paula, and welcome back to my Dream Channel. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Barbara Condron, well known author and speaker. She's an expert on dream analysis, and her dream dictionary, well, it's revolutionary. I believe it is the best dream dictionary you can buy. I'll put a link for it down below. Now, in this interview, she'll be discussing a dream that my husband Billy had the other night, delving into the meaning of dreams and their symbols. This dream has it all. It has UFOs, it has misty backgrounds, dogs, family, good and bad, global intricacies, and not only a message for Billy, but a message for the world. So let's get started.
All
Uh,
right, here we are. Yeah,
Hi,
good. Hi,
how you
welcome.
doing, Dr. B? Thank
I'm
you.
doing great. You're one of my best students in terms of dreaming and recall and working with your dreams and everything. And when you sent me this one, Billy, it was like, wow, this is like a global consciousness dream. And I think as people hear it, they will see that in it as well. But I thought it was a service to expose people to this dream and to actually talk about it, what it means, what it means to you personally and any dreamer, and also what it might mean for other people because of the universality of it. And
Mhm.
I'll let you go ahead and say it first, and I'll put it up on the screen. You can just kind of read it there so other people can see
Okay.
it too that might be watching this. Because that's just a good way to be able to see the dream itself, and people can imagine it as you're telling it. It always helps for the dreamer to tell his or her own dream, um, because when you tell it, you have the images in your mind. And if there's
Right.
something I have a question about, then I'll stop you and you can explain. But you're very good
Yeah.
at detailing your dream when you write them. I have to, you
And
said
also the
model.
feelings too. I try to get uh, um, a lot of times the feelings or what I was thinking or feeling in the dream, not thinking, but feeling, and sometimes that doesn't get put down in type. But as I'm talking about it, a lot of times if I remember a distinct feeling in a certain part of the dream, I like to bring it up, whether I put it down here or not. Uh, so so this dream started out. I was standing out in front of our home talking to a neighbor of ours. The neighbor was male. I don't recognize the person. I don't know if it was that important or not. Um, but it seemed like it might have been my next door neighbor. And as I looked towards the horizon, way off in the distance, I saw something strange that I'd never seen before. And just above the horizon, there were some black round objects in the sky. There were several of them, at least 5 to 7. I can't remember for certain how many there were. And they were stationary just above the horizon. There were one or two of them, I believe it was two, that were slightly larger than the others. And then the others were all the same size. Um, from my perspective, they were about 1 to 2 inches in diameter. But I knew they were much larger than that because they were on the horizon. They were very, very far away. So I told my neighbor to look in that direction, and I pointed in that direction so that he can see it, what I was looking at. And then all of a sudden, from that direction came a large whitish gray billowing cloud. It started low on the horizon and started billowing up higher and higher and getting closer towards us. And then I saw it was moving very, very fast, like supersonic speed towards us. Um, as it got closer, it filled the entire sky. And I sensed that it was created by these black objects. We quickly went inside and told everyone. So inside my home, we had about a dozen people. They were friends and family. Um, and I told everyone to get down. And I ushered everyone into the living room, which was in the middle of the house, as I thought it could be fallout from a nuclear explosion. And it was our only chance of survival, although I didn't think we had much of a chance to survive it. Then seconds later, when the cloud got to us, it was a thick mist, and it came into the house and permeated everything. It just came right inside. Um, Not with any force or anything. It just kind of seeped in through the walls and the bricks and into the room and was just everywhere around us. There was no escape, but it didn't seem like we needed to. There was nothing that was going on, and no one was harmed that I could tell. So the next morning, it fast forwards. There was no night that I remember. It just the next morning, everyone was in the living room and in the kitchen, and they were mingling about and chatting with each other as I walked in. And I picked up my iPad and I went to the internet. And then something very strange happened I'd never seen before. It didn't matter which website I went to, the same scene was showing. And it was like the World Wide Web had been hacked, and I couldn't see anything other than this one particular site or this one particular scene. The site was showing a live video of an overhead shot of a large lake. And there were thousands of boats and personal watercraft on the lake. And they were all coming together in one long line and positioning themselves side by side right next to each other, like they were forming a long chain. And I got the impression as I was witnessing this, like it was a human chain and that everyone was holding hands, although I didn't see that, but that's what I felt when I was watching this. And the reason for this, it was immediately obvious to me that this was a show of peace and cooperation. That the universe had determined it was time for our planet to make a quantum leap in consciousness to a higher dimension. And this was evidence of our new spiritual awakening. The universe had taken over the internet to show everyone what was happening around the world. The scene flashed to other scenes around the world just like this one. And I then knew the reason for the mist. So right when I saw this and I saw the scenes flashing everywhere, I knew that this mist had gone all around the world, just like in our home, and affected everyone the same way. I looked at everyone else around inside our home, and they were all engaged in conversation. Paula, my wife, was in the kitchen talking to a couple of ladies. I didn't want to interrupt anyone, so I excitedly waited until a break in the conversations. Finally, in the living room, there was a man sitting there. Actually, I didn't put it in. He was sitting on an ottoman there next to me. It's a man that I work with named Adam. That's a coworker. Uh, um, and he's actually an ex-coworker of my wife's. They both retired from the same job, and I've been working with him for about 2.5 years now. He had stopped talking, and I noticed that he was on a device. I don't know if it was an iPad or whatever, it doesn't matter, but he was on something like that, playing a video game. And I asked him if it was working okay, and he said that it was. I told him to go to a website, any website, and his device was showing some conflict around the world. And I knew immediately that this meant there were two simultaneous timelines, but that eventually what was left of the old destructive timeline would implode upon itself and a new global peace would prevail. I couldn't wait any longer, and I interrupted everyone else to tell them this great news. Everyone was so excited, we all went outside to walk around and experience this firsthand. We had 3 small dogs, and they were excited to be outside and were running back and forth across the road and into and out of a grassy field where some of us had ventured. So I was standing with a couple of people on my side of the street in front of the house, but 7 or 8 others had gone across the road into this grassy field. And the 3 dogs were running back and forth across the road. There were cars coming by, and I was worried that the dogs would get run over, but they didn't. And I determined that due to the new higher consciousness, cars were not even getting close to them. They ran back and forth across the street as they pleased, and there was not any close calls. And there were a lot of cars starting to come by, and there was nothing to even worry about. That was the end of the dream.
Wow, that was some dream, wasn't it? Now, let's learn what this dream is telling us. Dr. Barbara, with her expert knowledge and intuition, is going to help us understand how dreams can have a profound meaning. She'll start by breaking the dream down into the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. Let's see what she has to say.
So we're going to really go into this in depth because I want to share this with people who will be taking a course that actually teaches them how to go in and ask the 5 W's that are important in dream interpretation, or the 6, actually, the 6 questions. And so those are who, what, where, when, why, and which. So if we look at your dream that way, you have a cast of characters in the dream. So we'll be talking about those as we go along. You also have a plot line that's pretty, worthy of definitely a movie, right? And probably similar to some movies as well. You have
And it felt like being in one, yeah, when I woke up.
You have a when and a where, and we'll talk about that. And you also have a why, and the why is really the theme. And that's why I wanted to go deep dive into this more than anything else. The why is usually archetypal in its message, where it applies to everyone. And when I received this dream from you, when you sent it, one of the thoughts that I had was it took me back to the late 1970s and 80s. And I noticed, it was very interesting, Billy. I noticed that I used to do quite a bit of radio shows and a lot of lectures in the public on dreams. And inevitably, during that period of time, from like the late 70s on through the 80s, into the 80s, until the Iron Curtain came down, until the Berlin Wall fell.
Cold War was over, yeah.
And the whole, and at that point with Mikhail, the USSR was experiencing the same kind of astrological makeup that the United States is right now, as we're recording this, which is in the end of 2023. And so the same factors that were going on there when the USSR broke apart, the US is now going through, enduring, and I am laying my bets on the fact that we're not going to break apart. We're going to keep together just like we always have. And we've always been able to cooperate through our differences in this country. That's part of the bedrock of what the United States is. And that's not going to change because it's too much ingrained in people like you and me and our offspring. And it's like, that's what the US represents for the world. That's not a political statement. It's a statement that's true. And so no matter how many people come in from other parts of the world where that's not how they live, when you come to the United States of America, that's what you're wanting. And that's what you produce. So that's basically kind of that story. In that, the reason why that's important in terms of dreaming is that what I noticed was once that happened with the USSR, and it no longer was this big political, global power kind of nuclear power, then the dreaming that people would talk about every single time, somebody would come up with a nuclear war dream. And it was very interesting because I could see that it was because of the fear, the shadow of the unconscious fear in people that was just kind of programmed into us. I remember when I was young and the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, and I was, I believe, 10 years old when it happened. And I didn't really understand it at 10, but I knew it was important. I knew it was scary. My parents were worried. They were scared. Anything that I saw on, even the evening news was scary. And it was like, this is not good. And we used to, in school, we used to have like tornado drills and things like that, but there really wasn't much that you could do if a nuclear war was going to come, right? So, that was just like this real unknown for all of us.
We did the same thing. I can remember in third grade them actually doing, and in the beginning, it was nuclear fallout stuff that we were going through, drills that we were going through, not it wasn't tornado drills. They later changed it to that, but I know at least 3 or 4 times we went and hid under our desks, and I'm looking at the windows and I'm going, and I'm 7 years old, and I'm saying, that's not going to do anything. This desk is not going to do anything for. I've seen the films on TV, and this is not going to help.
Yeah, I
Tornado,
mean, they're
maybe
tested.
nuclear, holocaust,
Yeah.
and I had that fear briefly, ever so briefly, as I was running into the house from the cloud to gather everyone out and move everybody into the interior. But then it quickly, obviously, went away when I saw that nothing was happening. So
In the dream, right. So
in the dream, yeah.
the point being that once the history, the real living history, not the made up, but the real history was, that USSR was no longer an adversary with the United States at that point, then all of those fears collapsed in most of the people that I was interacting with in the 80s. Later that changed when I started doing global research and when the net started going. But in the 80s, it was more local in terms of, reaching from Detroit to Denver down to New Orleans and places in between, and radio, however far radio would reach, which was coast to coast. So mostly it was America, and it was the American think. It was our consciousness. And that just stopped. It was like all of a sudden nobody had dreams about nuclear war anymore. One of the things that I realized in working with that with myself and other people, because I had never had a dream of nuclear war, and then I had one that it was coming. And I realized in working with myself with the dream that nobody really knows what nuclear war is like. We imagine it, but we don't know because it has not happened. Testing has happened, and there have been bombs that have gone off, but the nuclear war, not the atomic, which ended World War II. The nuclear thing is still this big imagined unknown. So it was like everybody was saying nuclear war had happened, but it only happened in their imagination. And that's still true today. It could change anytime, but right now it's still true. And that is really kind of this global consciousness that's seeping back in again, where people are going to have dreams similar to yours, where this kind of, this nefarious imagined tragedy, just kind of like really tremendous fear manifestation of people around the world, we can bring it into being if we are not vigilant about who we are and what we want. And your dream tends to convey that different kind of outlook, that different kind of outcome, which answers actually the which question, which is the sixth question of a dream. And it really deserves to be out there. So that's why we're talking about it. So that's kind of my background of why I really wanted to talk with you about this, and we could deep dive into it. So we're going to start at the very beginning. So at the first, you're standing outside your home. So this is the place, the setting. So you live outside of in a suburb of Houston, Texas, right? So you live in kind of a cosmopolitan type of area, and you're talking to a male neighbor that you don't know. So in terms of symbolically for you, this dream is talking about very familiar frame of mind and a conscious aspect that you don't actually know in the dream, but you're thinking that he's a neighbor. So you're friendly toward him in the dream. So it's a part of yourself that you're friendly with, and you're at home. And then you've got this big thing start to happen far in the horizon of these black round objects in the sky. And
which I sense to be UFOs. Okay. And
unidentified flying objects. Yeah, it's like you don't know what it is.
Right. I didn't, I didn't actually put UFO when I was typing up the dream and recording it, but that's what it felt like to me.
Right. So if you have things in the air that are existing and you haven't identified them, then in the language of mind, that's talking about thoughts and ideas that are being created in your mind that you don't know what it is. So that could be a thought that's been planted there by somebody else or media, something else that you haven't identified as your own. You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know what it is. So it's some kind of, in your in the safety of your own home, your own space, how you know yourself, how you think, how you live, all that. You're looking far into the distance, which is looking in the future. And when you're looking into the future, it's murky, it's unknown, and yet it's coming towards you and you know it. And so it's actually talking about working with the inner deepest levels actually of the subconscious mind and what's going on there. And it's clear enough to you that you can identify 5 to 7, which is interesting because there are 5 levels of consciousness, ways to experience and create with mind that involve the subconscious and conscious mind. Then there's 2 more deeper inner levels, which enable us to have superconscious vision or superconscious awareness. So you've got 5 to 7, you've got that reference numerologically to both of those. And then you said that,
And then also the 2 of them were bigger than the others.
right, which would make sense because that's the superconscious kind of energy coming in. Because superconscious is like the plan. It's like the whole essence of understanding us as individuated beings, not as robotons or something, not as programmed, people that just work like sheep. They just follow whatever the dictates are of a stronger will, but they actually know who they are and they cooperate with other people who know who they are. And that's where we're really headed. That's your peace idea at the end, but we'll get there. So then as you're talking to the neighbor, then you've got what happens then. Tell us that again.
That's when the clouds start. I pointed towards him to show him to look at the black dots. So I pointed in that direction for him to look at the unidentified objects. And then that's when I saw that a cloud had started coming from that direction towards us.
And
And
that,
it was a grayish, whitish, glowing cloud. So,
yeah, which is really important. It's the key to the whole dream. Because the black objects, the gray, the gray white and the mist and all of that, which the mist keeps coming in where it even comes into your house, right?
right.
And it's like, and it doesn't hurt anybody. It just goes through the whole house. So every part of yourself, in terms of aspects of yourself, in terms of your frames of mind, your attitudes, your attitudes about communication, your attitudes about knowledge, learning, your what you don't know, what you do know, your conscious and unconscious parts of your mind, all of that, where you assimilate, where you rest, where you create, where you work, all of that's within your house. And so you're talking about your whole mind and its functioning. And so this mist comes through all of that. It affects all the aspects of yourself. And it also goes through and it doesn't hurt anybody because as long as it was unidentified, you didn't know. But it's like when it was at a distance, it was in what we call the 3rd level of consciousness, which is where thoughts just begin to manifest. Seed ideas are planted. But what this happens with the black and the white and the gray and the mist is actually talking about the emotional level of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so the whole quality of the dream is about emotion. And that's where it really, to me, is telling, because it's not like the reactionary dreams of the 70s and 80s of, oh my God, nuclear war, oh dear, where we were totally in opposition and polarized by it in our own dreaming and in the way we were thinking about it. Your dream portrays the possible reality, definitely for you, that there might be some other options here, that it might not just be black and white, but it actually might be shades of gray, where we're able to actually negotiate the emotions, stop reacting to ourselves and each other, and begin to think about responding with a little bit more insight and perhaps wisdom. And that's what happens when you go into the house and you pick up your iPad and you go to the internet, and what happens?
Yeah, it didn't matter what website I went to, it kept showing the same scene. And so it felt like to me like the web had been hacked and that the universe had done this, that the universe had sent the cloud, had sent the UFOs, which sent the cloud, and that they had also hacked the internet. So it didn't matter what anybody went to, it would show the same scene over and over again. And then it started showing, it just started flashing real quick from that original scene, that I saw the other scenes just like it around the world, where boats were coming together. People were in the boats or on jet skis or whatever, and they were pulling up like port to starboard next to each other in a line. So not in a line end to end, but sideways next to each other, forming a long chain. And like I said, I didn't see anybody holding hands or anything, but right when I saw it, that's what came into my mind, was this was like a human chain,
Mhm.
like we've seen with peace protests in the past, like in Czechoslovakia or wherever, in the past, where, they went across the whole country holding hands with each other for peace.
Mhm.
And that's what I felt was happening here. And then I saw that it was also happening all over the world at the same time.
Which is really interesting because, when we think back just 3 years ago, and the first global pandemic happened and everything shut down all over the world for a while. And there were pictures, and they're still on YouTube, of scenes of cities that are just, there's nobody around. I mean, it's like they've been evacuated or just abandoned, which they hadn't been. People were just hiding, and that was the whole kind of movement then. We have to deal with two things here, two very important things. One is the internet. What does it represent as a dream symbol? So we have to come up out of all of our conscious thinking about it, and that this could really happen, and imagining it out here, and that kind of thing, and realize that the subconscious mind chooses the internet as a symbol to represent something inside of us. So we have to ask, what is that? So what is the function of the internet? The internet is a way to make intuitive abilities physicalized. In other words, we all have intuitive abilities, and we don't have to have machines in order to be intuitive with other people. And the best example of that is probably a parent with a child, particularly mothers, but also fathers who are sensitive, that they can be physically apart from the child and they can know. Or twins, they can know when something's happening with their son, daughter, or twin, even though they're countries apart. The physical distance does not limit the mind. And that's what we're really looking at. We're really looking at going into the frontier of the mind, and that's really space. That's the space that we're beginning to really walk into and to understand and to make our own. And that's what this dream is talking about. When it's talking about the internet and it's talking about all of the scenes, the images being the same, it's like your mind is becoming focused toward one point. And that one point, as it keeps coming down the pike, is toward cooperating with yourself. It's a dream about you. It's a dream about you working with the universe, as you said, working with your higher mind, if you want to say it that way, working with God is what some people would say. You'll define your own terms for it, but it's that higher thought that has this wide, global, and even universal perspective. And how all of this is going to play out. How it plays out then in your dream is the lake, the water. Water is a symbol that's been all around the world of being consciousness. Water is consciousness itself. It's everyday physical life. So you're looking at how this fire power, which is the internet, can work with the water power to produce peace. And that is inside you. Fire is expansion and water is contraction. So how do we actually breathe in and out? How do we actually move so that we can be very different, seemingly, and still cooperate, still like make that human chain that you're talking about? And that's what the dream is coming down to now, is how do I do this inside me? That's what the dream is portraying in you, is that you're actually doing this. And then what happens?
Well, then what happens is I wanted to tell everybody what was going on, but I looked around, everybody was in conversation with each other. And when I say there's friends and family here, there's only two people that I recognize. I mean, I sensed that some of the people were an aunt or an uncle or a cousin, and some were friends, but I can't put a name or a face on everybody except for two people. Paula, my spouse, and Adam, my coworker. Um, I wasn't wanting to interrupt their conversations, so I patiently waited for a little while, and then finally Adam, he might have been talking to someone, I believe, and then I realized he wasn't anymore, and he was playing a video game on a device, and so that's when I asked him, because I want to know, is he having the same issues I'm having, about going, not being able to go to any website. So I asked him to look at a website, which he did, and it was a completely different picture than what I was looking at. Um, I don't remember exactly what was going on, but it seemed like to me it was rioting in the streets or something like that. There was conflict in what he looked at. Um, and but it didn't seem to phase me in any way. It's like I knew immediately that that was only part of what was going on, and what I was seeing on my end was greater, and it was going to prevail. And I had that feeling throughout the rest of the dream. From the time when I saw that the gray mist wasn't going to do any harm to anyone, to even looking at his device showing, scenes of carnage. Um, like I wrote in here, I realized that there was two different timelines, and that the one that was beneficial to us all was much bigger and much stronger and was going to prevail, and that the old timeline of destruction and evil and everything else was going to finally implode upon itself. Just like, I mean, that's what I felt in the dream, and that's the way I wrote it in here, um, and destroy itself. And what we were going to be left with was what I've been told eventually we get to since I was born, is heaven on earth.
So the dream is in that way self-fulfilling prophecy. But let's walk it back and look at the symbology in it so that we can see perhaps more specifically deeper levels in terms of why you had this dream, right? And why you had it now.
Right.
And so there's the sense that you have all these aspects of yourself that you consider family. So you're considering them as being aspects that you're familiar with, that you know very well, that you understand, even though you cannot name them, except for your wife and this coworker that you're very familiar with, who's a male. So you have a subconscious aspect, which represents your whole subconscious mind because you're married to her. And you have a conscious aspect that you know very well. So you're talking about how your mind is being used, how you're using your mind to create, how you're using your mind on a daily basis, and the kind of life that you live. And I know you pretty well. And I know that you're a spirited man. And I also know that you're just and that you're compassionate and that you have a large degree of self-awareness and management in terms of any kind of emotion that you might go through. You don't just pop off, and you don't do emotion lightly. You're thoughtful. And so in the dream, it's telling you how and why. And the dream really here splits between knowing that there's a difference between the mind, that's your one timeline, the whole mind, and the physical brain and the conscious mind, which is represented by Adam in your dream, the man that you know very well, the coworker. And when you defined him or described what you see in him that you can see in you too, there were two words you used. What were they?
Quirky and oblivious.
Yeah. So that's perfect. I mean, it's amazing how revelatory this dream is in the language of mind, because you're very clearly here at the end seeing the difference between being in your mind, working with the subconscious mind, being committed to what you're thinking and how you're creating in your life and what that produces, and what watching video games, which are a game, number one, which is the way you play the game of life, and it's scripted, it's on a machine, it's feeding back, reacting your emotional reactions to you, That's this aspect of you that's just physical, right? And that's what he's doing. And that's what that aspect of you is doing. And what the effect of that is conflict and death. So in the language of mind, that means constantly being at odds, constantly being in turmoil, constantly being confused, constantly causing forced change. And that is the old way. It's the way that we used to do everything, because that's what the brain was programmed to do. It didn't know any better. It didn't know any different yet. But your whole dream is about, hey, something's different is happening here, and it's big, and this is what's going to turn out, and this is how it's going to work. So to me, it's very clearly the difference between reacting emotionally, which is what most people do. You know, they see something on Facebook, or they see something on any kind of the media stuff, and they immediately pop off the opposite viewpoint. Or they go, yeah, I think that too, and they just hop on the bandwagon. And yet we're at a time right now, particularly with this kind of nervous system that's working on all of us. It's the global thing. And that's part of that emotional mist and fog and all that. It's time for us to really step back and to be in our minds in ways that we haven't even known were possible.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even know it was possible. We believed that, you know, there was a heaven somewhere, and maybe if we were good, we would get there. Or maybe if we confessed on our deathbed, we'd make it, or something like that. And that's true around the world. It's not just a Christian belief. It's true. There's that story in many, many cultures around the world. And yet what we're waking up to is the reality that the present moment, right now, we can be in hell or heaven, and that it might just be a choice. It might be a choice to think before we say something, or think before we act, rather than to react with conditioning, which is the video game. You know, there's a lot of talk now about war. We're talking about it in ways that we haven't really talked about it before. And it's pretty open, and it's pretty caustic, it's pretty extreme, and it gets pretty argumentative. But, you know, that is the American way, that we do talk about these things and we work them out. We don't go after one another. And so we have to learn how to be mindful and express our views without taking sides, right? And that's what your dream is about. And that's what creates global peace inside of us, is to have that overall arcing idea that we're living our life through and by, so that we can identify the things that are not known and stop reacting from fear and wanting to kill it. I mean, we do this with microbes in our body. You know, everybody's gut is messed up because we've been trying to use antibiotics to kill the bacteria that we were afraid would take over the body and kill us, that kind of thing. And it's, as a result, we've just made superbugs because they want to live too. And they live in our body all the time, but they don't always cause mishaps. In fact, they become part of our digestive system and how our body works. But we've been clueless about that until now. And even now, many people are clueless about it still. So we're in this flux of change of what are people willing to be awake and alert about? Because that is the necessary ingredient for the peace and cooperation that your dream is painting. We have to claim the points where we're quirky and oblivious. And we have to stop doing that. We have to stop knee-jerking and reacting and hurting ourselves and other people. That requires a mindfulness that very few people have had as a way of thinking life. But it is a way that, because they have done it, we can do it too. So that's why people talk about concentration and meditation, visualization, practices that are mental practices. And that's why I asked you, because I have enlisted your aid right now to be one of the editors of the 108 days that I've written, and is going into a coursework whereby we aid people to have a very simple and easy and comfortable way to go into meditation and into deep states of meditation, starting with to become an Omkara, an Om maker. So you start with one Om, and then you add one each day until you reach 108, which is the very ancient practice. And so you've been working through that material, and the first question I asked you was, where are you in that process? Because I knew that wherever you were was what stimulated this dream to take place. So I want you to speak to that in terms of how you fit this dream into your everyday life. I mean, why did you have this dream when you had it? What are you thinking?
Oh, well, it's just coming to me as you were explaining it, actually. I've had contemplations and thoughts about, the old ways of reacting to situations versus the new ways that aren't particularly new to me right now. I've been making this transition for many, many years, you know. Um, but taking it a step further, I mean, and not that I would act out on anything, but in my brain, acting out on this is how this should be dealt with, and being opinionated about it and everything, when outwardly I'm not. And I don't want to be that way. And I haven't been that way for a long time. I've made that transition 15 years ago, but there's still some of the old ways that's still in between these ears
Yeah.
that comes up in my thoughts. And I've been conditioning myself to just let it go, and because that's not what I want. And I don't want to even go down that road, and I wouldn't physically go down that road. I wouldn't, treat anybody else, with any disrespect, and any time I come up with a situation where I have an interaction with another human being, and they've done something or said something that I disagree with, I take a step back and I look and try to evaluate, is it really, something I need to disagree with, and it just nothing as my um my thoughts and opinions on everything doesn't matter nearly as much as they used to me. Either way, and um I think that's what a lot of this stream was about, because I'm sure I was doing that the day um, before some meditations or after or during. Um, and I think that's why it came up, because I was wanting to access my higher self and be more consistent in my thoughts in how I want things to turn out. The peace and cooperation. Um, and I can see too where being eager to tell everyone else, as I do here at the end, it's something that I'm stepping out a little bit more and a little bit more with, with people that I interact with, and sometimes they understand it, sometimes they don't, and I'm not judging the ones that don't. It's just they're not in a place where they can yet. Um, but maybe I'm planting a seed for the future. And that's what I'm doing. And you mentioned that you wanted to look too at my hologenetic profile with the gene keys, and a part of this is my life's work as well. It's
Talk
part
about
of
that a
what
little bit. Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
I haven't been studying it much lately. Kind of taken a step back from it for a little while, but I think this dream is probably going to kickstart me getting back into a little bit more. Um, you know, in the first four gene keys of my profile, um, the life's work, um, is for me, it's natural, and this
Put it
is
up here so
forgive.
people can see it.
Yeah.
There you go.
So the life's work, I mean, the city for me is just to be, and that was a revelation for me when I first saw this a few years ago. But it made perfect sense, because I kept thinking, what am I going to be when I grow up? I'm 60 years old. What am I going to be when I grow up? What's in my future? And it tells me here just to be, and on the way to that is being natural.
Mhm.
Um, and in the excuse me, um, at the other end of the profile, my purpose is farsightedness and omniscience, and that's something that, because I can remember a friend of mine's dad when I was in my teens telling me that my problem was I dreamed too much, you know, and it seemed like I was always knowing that there was a better life, or a better way to live, a better way to enjoy life, and I've always had this feeling that peace and prosperity could be available to all of us, at once, not just a select few. And I've known that since an early age. Um, so those two things, I think, right there have been, I've been paying attention to that lately, and I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to it. Um, every time I read my profile and the gene keys, it brings up something new, because there's a lot there. There's so much, and I can be studying it, which I plan on doing it for the rest of my life. Um, it it's all about self-reflection.
Yeah, and if we've used your gene key as an example, if you look at this line right here, then if you would imagine that that's the horizon line, and that everything up here is the daytime heaven, and everything down here is the nighttime heaven. And so this becomes dawn. Your radiance is dawn. It's the dawning of the new light. And it's the new life that every morning when we wake up, we are exposed to and we can embrace. And your path is integrity. And integrity means honesty, it means truthfulness. And so it makes sense that you would be a prolific dreamer and that you would seek the wisdom that dreams have. I mean, you have a lot of help there, is what I'm saying, which is really good. And then your everyday life during the daytime, your daydreaming part really is about naturalness. It's about being who you are. And especially now with so much being artificial, so much in our life being artificial, artificial flavors, artificial smells, artificial everything. Even on the net now, it's AI, it's artificial intelligence. It's not real people doing real things. And it's, avatars, fake looks and changing the way you look. And it's like all of that's like smoke and mirrors. And yet most people don't really know that yet, right? So it's like in your day's work, you're really a naturalist in terms of what's real about life. And then it comes over to dusk, which is evolution, and that's your magnetism. That's where instead of polarity and conflict, you're all about what draws us together. The magnet draws things together. It doesn't repel them. It really draws them together. It's a magnetic force. And it always seeks to look. If it doesn't click here, then it will click somewhere else. So it's that coming together that you were talking about in your dream. And then that
Right.
paves the way for the purpose down here, which is the farsightedness that you have in your dreams, which even came up literally in this dream, where you were looking at the horizon far off, and even ended up with your time, two parallel times. And it is, the way that time is measured in our physical life is by the rising and setting of the sun. That's the way the conscious mind knows to tell time, the passing of days. Subconscious mind is not limited that way. It tells time according not to experience, but to understandings. And that's what you were just describing in your own way. That it's important. Understanding is important to you. That it's important to go deep into something, to see the fuller picture, to see the whole picture. Those are the universal images in your dream. So it's really
Right.
talking about you. And the dream work gets really moving here when you have your own personal profile. And you can understand how your dreams are moving and why, and work with them in those ways. So that's a little look at gene keys a little bit differently. I am doing coursework next year on that to help people to see that and use their gene keys well with that. So, and harmony, I mean, that's your pearl. So equilibrium and harmony, that's when you become a dream interpreter, that's what you are living. And the pearl in our existence is ourselves magnified. It's a Jupiter effect. And so it's the point of prosperity. It's the point of you really shining your uniqueness, your individuality, and being that beacon for other people. You were talking about, beginning to talk with other people or realize, I would really encourage you to realize your influence and impact. Because whether you say anything or not, just you being you has an impact.
Well, and I can see evidence of that, especially at work. I work with a pretty diverse group of about 12 other people on a team. And yeah, I can see all of this at work and in the way that I interact with them throughout the day. And I'm only there, I work part-time, so I'm only there 2.5 days a week. But it's interesting what you said earlier, talking about how the way I think and I don't just react, I don't blurt anything out. I think about something before, responding. I actually had a coworker of mine, a young lady in her 30s that she was having a conversation with me and one of my other male coworkers last week and mentioned that exact trait as one of the things that she really liked about me, is that I didn't just blurt out something. I thought about it, and then would give them a pearl of wisdom, and I thanked her very much for the compliment because I didn't know that was being noticed. And so, yeah, and that gives me more confidence to take it to the next level without being pushy. So.
It's exciting to me to see evidences in myself and other people of emotional maturity, because there's so much obvious lack of it and that's being kind of promoted right now in the ways that we communicate through this being our nervous system, the internet being our nervous system collectively. And it's exciting to me to see that there's more maturity coming forward in individuals and that's being expressed as well, where there is reasoning, there's a stillness in the body and the tendency to just knee jerk and say stuff without thinking first. The mindset, the mindfulness, all of those things now are coming into more of the discussion and more of the practice of more people. So that's a good thing because that does promote peace.
Yeah, so everyone, when I told them what was going on, was very excited and they wanted to go outside to see for themselves what was going on in the world. And several of us, like I mentioned, stayed on the side of the house, on the front of the house by the road, and across the street, there was an open field. There was houses on both sides, but there was an open field in between them, nice green grass. And about 7 or 8 of the other people that were there had walked across to go walk in this grassy field. And then we had the 3 small dogs that were running back and forth across the road that at first I was concerned about them getting hit by the cars, but then I realized that that was not happening. And the main reason it wasn't happening is because everyone had a higher consciousness and it just harm would not come to these 3 dogs running in front of cars because we all knew how to better take care of things.
Maybe better respect life. That might be one way to think about it. Because you ended up, right before that, you had Adam, the coworker who was doing the video games and was doing all the seeing, on his screens and stuff, he was seeing mass murder or whatever. And it's like, okay, so the shift here is in the mind. And when the mind becomes the conscious mind becomes honest. And when that happens, then the whole mind, inner mind opens up. Until then, it's closed. We're closed mind, literally closed minded. Just the mind is stuck, limited to the brain only. And even though we like dogs, dogs are habits and they are habitual ways of thinking. So there is a respect of what the habits are. And I see that in a lot of people talking about mindset. And there's a consciousness about mindset now that what hasn't been there before. It's like the training kind of aspect that you train the physical body, you train the conscious mind. And when you do, you get different results and better results than if you leave it undisciplined. And so that's how I see that little end thing where the cars, which are the body, are no longer ruled by habits, however friendly they are and however attached we are to them. We are no longer ruled by them in any way. We respect them for what they are. So we respect the fact that the body can move habitually when it's trained in certain ways, like martial artists, for instance, our sports people or musicians. There are different ways of using the body. Singers, there are different ways of building discipline in the body where it can produce at will. And that's kind of the end thinking of the newer consciousness. That's how I see that, is that it's taking responsibility for the mind.
The the grassy field too seems to have more significance than what I gave it here, because it was very clear to me. And so 7 to 8 aspects of myself went into that field. In the language of mind, a field such as that is subconscious existence, I believe, is it not?
Yep.
So,
Where the water is the conscious life experiences and the field would be subconscious experiences. So, that it's it could be talking about any intuitive ability that you have, not these devices that people think are intuitive. Our ability as human beings to evolve into intuitive individuals. And there's some scuttlebutt about extinction of humans and just all kinds of things that are kind of disturbing and annoying, actually. It's like, no, we don't have to go the way of the dinosaurs, and we're not going to. There will be people who actually evolve, and there will be some people who don't, which has always been true. There is a mortality to human life, but we are moving toward where we'll have more choice, where we possibly can live longer lives as long as we want to be productive. And that's been my view of life since my 20s, is that as long as I am fit and able to contribute and to continue to grow and to help other people to do the same thing, then I want to be here. But once it gets to a point where that's fulfilled, then I'm ready to release it. And that's a different way of living, not just thinking, but living, than most people my age.
yeah.
And when that becomes more common, then we'll find a drop in the drug addiction. That'll be the obvious thing that first will happen. We'll find a drop in being compulsive eaters of materials that we know are not, the body doesn't know what to do with it, that kind of thing. We'll find differences in the way that people think and live. There are a lot less fighting the self about any of that. We can call it vice, human individual vice, that are temptations that all of us deal with. We will find that we're responding to it differently, not reacting emotionally anymore, but choosing to respond. And that will end a lot of wars right there. Makes it very practical and real, and takes it out of the imagination so much, out of these movie kind of situations, and takes the drama out and brings it all down into right here and right now, and the fact that I can make better choices. And so can you. And your dream is saying that you are. So congratulations. Good work.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's always great talking with you, Billy. It's always great hearing your dream. Yes.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you
look forward to the next time.
putting a lot more depth to it than I could do on my own. So I appreciate it very much.
And I appreciate the opportunity to serve, because dreams do come in service to our healing and our wholeness. And that's a given. It's a definite. So understanding them makes all the difference in the world. So I will keep dreaming with you of that same kind of movement. And I'm sure some other people that hear this will either also continue or then maybe they will start. And that's how the whole world changes right there.
All right.
All right.
I'm ready for change.
Till next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was an amazing dream and an amazing analysis. If we are to have peace in our world, it has to start within each and every one of us. Dreams don't lie. To help you remember your dreams, put a tablet and a pen by your bed, write that date on it. This shows an intention. Right when you wake up, write that dream down and keep a dream journal. Now, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I do read every one. Also, if you're interested in the Gene Keys, I'll leave a link below for you to get your own profile, also to learn more about Gene Keys and Richard Rudd if you'd like. Thank you for joining us.